Welcome back to This is a Commander channel, where this is a Commander channel, and today I'm going to talk about Commander Tough Rules and Cool Interactions, episode 21. Today's episode is going to take a look at Isshin 2 Heavens as 1 because he is a very popular commander, and I have seen a whole bunch of people get his ability wrong. I've seen, read, or heard people mistrigger things twice with his ability many times, and I'm hoping that this episode will help to clear up some of these things. So if you have someone in your close play group, or there's a regular at your LGS that has an Isshin deck, then you may want to send this video to them. So let's start by reading the ability in full. Isshin says that if a creature attacking causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So, two things to note. One, this is not a replacement effect, which isn't too crucial to the video today, but I do hear people referring to his ability as a replacement effect, often because it uses the word if, and there's actually more to replacement effects than that. One day I'll release a dedicated video to replacement effects to help clear up confusion about them, but for now, on to little note number 2, which is that Isshin's effect does not copy the triggered ability, but it simply says that it triggers an additional time. In most cases, this will not be important, but in cases that involve targets or modes to be chosen, it means that you can pick different things for the second trigger. Okay. So for this episode, there's going to be a lot of cards that I mention, more than any episode so far. In order to make this episode not too long, I'm going to try and cover them as succinctly as possible, which isn't an easy thing for me as I love to talk on and on about things. For context, most of my episode scripts have been about 1 to maybe a 1.5 page script, single space. This episode script came out to around 5 pages, single space. So let's get to it. All right, I have structured this video so that I'll present a card, read its effect, give you a chance to pause the video and really reread it again if you want to, and ponder the situation to see if it does or does not get an additional trigger from Isshin. And then I'll provide the answer. Some of these will get a kind of detailed reason for it, some may not, and the ones that do actually work with Isshin, not much explanation needed since it actually does work with Isshin. So this first one is pretty interesting. The Sky Massacre is a Rakdos saga that has a second chapter ability that says, whenever a Berserker attacks this turn, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. If you have Isshin out and you attack with a single Berserker, how many cards will you draw and how much life will you lose? Again, feel free to pause the video and reread the abilities and think about the situation. Is the Sky Massacre a card that interacts with Isshin? So this is actually the card that inspired me to make this video, and it's one of the most unintuitive examples for today's episode, so that's why I'm starting with it. The answer is no, it does not interact with Isshin, and you will only draw 1 card and lose 1 life. The reason for this is because of Comprehensive Rules 603.2e, which says some effects refer to a triggered ability of an object. Such effects refer only to triggered abilities the object has, not any delayed triggered abilities that may be created by abilities the object has. And this basically means that you're not triggering an ability of a permanent for that saga. If it was worded in a way like the Sky Massacre gains whenever a Berserker attacks this turn, or if it said Berserkers you control gain whenever this creature attacks, then these two things would work. But in its current wording, you're triggering an ability not of a permanent, but of an ability. If you want another example of this, take a look at Viren, Voice of Duality, and the Mirari Conjecture. If there's enough controversy over this, maybe I'll dedicate a full episode to things just like this. Okay, next one. Maybe you bought the Street Fighter Secret Lair and you've got your Ryu World Warrior out with an Isshin, and Ryu has training which says, whenever this creature attacks with another creature with greater power, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So in this situation, you attack with both Ryu and Isshin, and since Isshin is 3 power, will Ryu get a second training trigger, or is the specificity of the training trigger going to stop it from happening? And pause if you need to. The answer is yes this time. You will have an Isshin seeing the attack trigger and get 2 triggers of a +1/+1 counter being placed on Ryu. Bonus thing, you will indeed get both counters, even though after the first one resolves and Isshin's power is no longer greater than Ryu, as they're both now 3, you do actually get both triggers. It doesn't care now that he's bigger. There's no if that would restrict this. Next one, you have out your Isshin, a Sublime Angel, and one other normal 1/1 creature. Doesn't really matter. And you attack with the Sublime Archangel. How many exalted triggers will you have? How many instances of +1/+1 will she get? This one is fairly easy, I hope. You will get 6 total instances of +1/+1 till end of turn. Normally it would be 3 with the 3 creatures out with Exalted, but with Isshin out, the attacks alone requirement isn't enough to stop him from seeing an attack trigger. Alright, let's keep it going. You have out Isshin and Combat Celebrant, and you attack with the Combat Celebrant, which reads, if Combat Celebrant hasn't been exerted this turn, you may exert it as it attacks. When you do, untap all other creatures you control, and after this phase, there is an additional combat phase. When you do attack with Combat Celebrant, you do exert him, triggering the untap and additional combat. With the Isshin out, though, how many total extra combats will you get? And the answer is you will only get 1 additional combat from the Combat Celebrant. Your Isshin will not see this ability and give you an additional combat. You won't get the additional trigger. Like the Blood Sky Massacre example, this isn't going to seem very intuitive for many of you, which that's why I'm making this video. In this case, it is a permanence ability that is being triggered, which Isshin does care about, but where this falls short is that the attack from the Combat Celebrant is not what is giving you the extra combat. It is the action of exerting him. And Isshin doesn't give you double exert abilities. So yeah, this is just a case of very specific language coming into play. Okay, you've got out Isshin and Druids Repository, or as I sometimes call it Repository, Druids Repository, and you attack with 5 creatures. How many charge counters will you put on the Druids Repository? Will it be 1 from the 1 attack that you've made? Will it be 2 because Isshin gives you an additional 1 on that 1 combat? Will it be 5 because Druids Repository sees 5 total creatures attacking? Or will it be 6 because Isshin adds an additional trigger to those 5 triggers? And the answer is, pause the video if you want to, it's a little bit of a trick if you're going purely based on the 4 options that I have provided here. It's none of those 4. If you said the answer is 10, then you would be correct. There are 5 initial triggers that Druids Repository will see, but Isshin will actually do an additional trigger for all 5 of those individually for a total of 10 charge counters. I hope that I was able to trick some of you with that one, but I wanted to try and take a a usually fairly easy one, and twist my answers to mislead you, since when you're in a real game with players, you're going to encounter all sorts of thought processes or processes, whatever that is, and hope that, I hope that you get to see all the possible things that people might say out loud and how that might influence you in what you think the answer might be. Okay, now back to a creature again. You have out Isshin and Wildfire Eternal, and you attack with the Wildfire Eternal. But wait, this Wildfire Eternal has two triggered abilities. One that cares about it being blocked, and one that cares about it not being blocked. Okay, so situation 1, Wildfire Eternal attacks and is blocked. Does the defending player lose 4 life, or do they lose 8 life from the Afflict 4? And then situation 2, the Wildfire Eternal attacks and isn't blocked. Do you get to cast only one instant or sorcery, or do you get to get a second trigger of casting an instant or sorcery from your hand for free? Pause now if you want to really read these, but for now I'll give you a hint. The result for both situations is the same, and that is that they will not get an additional trigger. If blocked, the defending player will only lose 4 life, and if unblocked, you will only get to cast one instant or sorcery from your hand for free. The reason for this is because in both of those situations, I'm clearly distinguishing the two situations by whether the Wildfire Eternal is being blocked or not, which means that is the actual trigger action of blocking or not being blocked. Yes, the Wildfire Eternal does have to attack in both situations, but that's not what's causing the trigger to happen. You have to go to the declare blocker step for this to trigger, so Isshin doesn't care about his being blocked or not. Up next is Curse of Opulence, which is a curse that you enchant onto a player. If you put it onto opponent A and opponent B attacks opponent A, will Isshin see this? How many total gold tokens will be created? I hope that this one is a little easier for some of you. The answer is that 4 total gold tokens will be created. 1 + 1 for you and 1 + 1 for opponent B. That was an easy one. Now, let's take a look at Eradicator Valkyrie, which has Boast, and that ability says, activate only if this creature attacked this turn and only once each turn. Its Boast costs 1 and a black mana, as well as sacrificing a creature to make each opponent sacrifice a creature or planeswalker. So, with Isshin out, and you attack with Eradicator Valkyrie, and then after you declare him as an attacker, you activate the Boast ability, how many creature or planeswalkers must your opponents sacrifice? Do they sacrifice 1? Do they sacrifice 2? The answer is sadly just the 1, as Boast is a activated ability and not a triggered ability, and Isshin again only sees triggered abilities. The next card to look at is Cunning Rhetoric, which says, whenever an opponent attacks you and/or one or more planeswalkers you control, exile the top card of that player's library. The rest isn't important for the episode, so you have this enchantment out, and your Isshin is out, and your opponent attacks your planeswalker. Will Isshin cause you to exile 2 cards from their library, or only just the 1? Again, I hope this was a little easier for most of you. You would indeed get an additional trigger. It doesn't matter that they're attacking a planeswalker or you. Isshin just cares that it is an attack action that is triggering this enchantment. Next card, you attack with your Isshin this turn, and then in main phase 2, you play your Mardu Heartpiercer, which has Raid. And that says, when Mardu Heartpiercer enters the battlefield, if you attacked this turn, Mardu Heartpiercer deals 2 damage to any target. Will you have 1 trigger of 2 damage or 2 triggers of 2 damage? In this case, it is just the one trigger. Yes, it's a permanence ability that's triggering, but it's the entering the battlefield that is triggering the Mardu Heartpiercer's ability, despite attacking being a requirement of that ability. Okay, you have out Isshin and a Propaganda, which is an enchantment that says creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 generic mana for each creature they control that is attacking you. And your opponent wants to attack you with 3 creatures. Will they have to pay a total of 6 generic mana for the attack, or will they have to pay a total of 12 generic mana? In this case, Isshin will not see this as a triggered ability. If you remember some of the things I covered in Tough Rules and Cool Interactions episode 11, Propagation creates a restriction for combat, but again, not a triggered ability, which Isshin, that's the only thing he cares about. And finally, let's take a look at a new card like Rabble Rousing, which has a hideaway ability, which I'm not going to go into that. You can check out episode 20 for more details on copying that, which Isshin clearly doesn't do. He won't copy Hideaway, but it does also have a second triggered ability that says whenever you attack with 1 or more creatures, create that many 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens. Then, if you control 10 or more creatures, you may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So, if you have hidden away a card with Rabble Rousing, and then while you have out an Isshin and you attack with 10 creatures, what will happen? How many creature tokens will you create, and what will you get to play for free? Okay, most of you easily pick up on the creature tokens, and you will indeed make 10 tokens and then make another 10 for 20 total tokens created at the end of all of this. But for the free card played, does that get an additional trigger? Well, assuming that you do indeed have 10 or more creatures, you will get 2 total play for free triggers. The sad thing is that the second one that resolves will basically not matter, as the first resolution will play the card, and then when the second one tries to resolve it, it won't be able to see a card that is in exile with the Rabble Rousing and just do nothing. I did say basically because this would be the case in most cases, but here the Rousing does say that you may cast the card for free. So if you were to have a card like Shamanic Revelation exiled with the Hideaway, you could opt to not cast it in the first triggered ability that resolves, but that first ability still makes 10 new creatures. And then the second triggered ability will resolve and you make 10 more creatures, and then you can choose to cast the Shamanic Revelation, drawing you N plus 20 cards rather than just N plus 10 cards. So that's pretty cool. Alrighty then. That's all I have for this episode, and whew, this one was a lot to say. If you managed to make it this far into the episode, I really do appreciate that, and I'm glad you're enjoying the content so much. This episode took a lot more time to make than the others, as I had to look up a bunch more cards for all these specific situations that I could think of that people may make errors on, and this also resulted in a lot more editing and rendering than normal, not to mention writing up the script. So please do give the video a like to help it get seen by more Commander players, and also please do subscribe for more videos like this. Okay, I need to get a drink of water and go to sleep. I'm looking at the time. It's 4:40 a.m. for me right now. I'm actually going to edit and render this later. So have a good one. Ta-ta.